Welcome to today's Morning Scramble, presented by Wildlife World Zoo and Aquarium.
I'll tell you what, we can offer you 2 or 3 ways to improve your life. But our next guest has 7. Count them. As he enumerates, as a matter of fact. He is Robert Taylor. I thank you so much for being with us. And Robert, in the position that you're in as author, not only of A New Way to Be Human, 7 Spiritual Pathways to Becoming Fully Alive, world traveler. Howard, here's the test. Give me the 7 ways.
Well, firstly, it's great to be with you, Pat. Thank you so much.
Now, that's 8.
Well, of course, you are a pathway. Yes, clearly. So I talk about these 7 pathways. The first is knowing the power of your own story. I talk about the way in which life presents risky invitations to us, those things that disrupt our life, that normally invite us to some new place of transformation that we had not expected. I talk about the enclosures that keep us from ourselves and from the fullness of our own magnificence, from the divine and the holy found within us. And some tools for how to actually step beyond those enclosures. I talk about being at home in our heart and what those several places of home normally mean for each of us. I also talk in the book about the pathway of delight. I call it Holy Surprises, and it is about finding delight and joy and wonder in the course of each and every day.
One of my most important discoveries in your book is the surprise part.
Oh, good.
You just don't hear about holy surprises. Holy Spirit and the Holy Sepulchre, Holy surprise, what a great phrase.
Well, thank you. I think for me, I tell the story in the book of this breakfast that I moderated a conversation at between Desmond Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And as they were sitting on stage together, the Dalai Lama had come in a little late. We knew he would. And there he started shifting his left elbow, poking Tutu in the ribs. And Tutu looked at him and said, "What are you doing?" And then the Dalai Lama just keeps poking him. And he stares at Tutu and he says, "You've gotten fat. You've put on weight." And, of course, the audience didn't know what to do with that. The two of them were like little kids. They collapsed into peals of laughter.
Spiritual hijinks on stage.
Absolutely. And the audience just has the pause button hit. And then Tutu finally looks at the Dalai Lama and says, "You better behave yourself. Start acting like a holy man." And with that, the audience had permission to laugh. But I tell the story because, we often put these iconic people up on a shelf and kind of shrink wrap or bubble wrap them and forget that they're very human. But I think more importantly, what I love about that story and what it invites for each of us is how do we find moments to be playful and silly and filled with wonder and joy in the course of every day.
And you were the other guy on stage.
Oh,
right? So how did you get past the awe?
Well, I've known Desmond Tutu for 32 years. He began as the person who rescued me from having to be imprisoned in South Africa in 1980 and served as a mentor of mine, someone who I admired, and a friendship has just been close. He's been loyal and generous to me. He actually flew over and took part in the Los Angeles book launch for the event in May of this year, which I was honored by. And then His Holiness, you can feel the aura of both of them when they walk into the room. You're in the presence of great people. And I think it has to do with how they're grounded. And in the book, I talk a lot about how to be grounded every day in the things that really matter. Because I think we so often get caught up in our workplaces or in our personal lives in the sort of fluff or the stuff that's ultimately not important, but that takes so much of our time. And I think what the two of them point to is that when you're grounded and when you're focused on what matters, whatever that might be in your own story and your own life, you're also able to be playful about the day. And That's very appealing.
But did you hear those voices? Voices across Arizona saying, Pat, listen, that's fascinating, but don't stop with the holy surprises. I want to find out what the rest of the 7 are.
All right. So, where do you want to go with those? You want to talk about connecting stories?
No, I just want you to continue on telling us about the 7 because you didn't finish.
Oh,
You were talking about the holy surprises.
I was, and
I have to get you back in order now.
I talk about the way in which our lives are upended by things that surprise us, and I think for most of us, we often try to clutch at life as we know it and as we imagine it because we want certainty and safety. And that's true for most of us. I mean, it's a human trait. But there's a difference between wanting to live with just certainty and safety and also being able to say, my gosh, when this hairpin curve of life, which is one of the pathways, when a hairpin curve is thrown at me, I have a choice. I can respond to it and know that it's a sort of a cutting edge, a growing edge for my life, or else I can choose to distance it and say, keep away, life. I'm going to stick with what I know. And when we do that, we tend to diminish our own compassion, our own magnificence, and our own capacity for making a difference in the world.
Why were you imprisoned?
I was about to be imprisoned in South Africa because of my refusal to serve in the South African military. Not because I'm a pacifist, but because the military back in the 70s and the 80s was used to enforce the apartheid system. It was the official policing of the country. And used as the arm of the government for violently putting down its own citizens. You grew up in Cape Town? I grew up in Cape Town, which is a stunning city surrounded by beautiful mountains. It's one of the things I love about what you have here in Phoenix, the mountains everywhere. But
South Africa at that time was the zenith of bias, bigotry, apartheid.
Absolutely. And I talk in the book about the enclosures that keep us locked off from ourselves and from others. And I think my first experience of that was as a teenager in South Africa, getting to know black South Africans, creating friendships, and discovering that the government essentially in its policies tried to wall people off, enclose people off from one another, and in the process to prevent us knowing one another in our humanity and our brilliance.
There are so many things to talk with you about. I mean, we could do an hour just simply reviewing your experience on stage with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu.
I'll come back tomorrow morning.
Well, no, you can come back in just a moment because we said, wait a minute, we can't cover everything in just one segment, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to continue this conversation with Robert Taylor, another actor besides Robert Walker. Robert Taylor continues on in the Morning Scramble with a conversation he might have had with Jesus. That's coming up next. This is Pat McMahon.
I know I was sweet.
Here's the answer to today's CenturyLink question of the day. If you didn't win, don't worry. We'll do it again on the next Morning Scramble.
Jamie Farr, the pride of Toledo, Ohio, and MASH, of course. Susan Crow, congratulations to you. You've won a gift certificate, bunch of subs from the Cousins Sub Shops. Doesn't hardly get any better than that. And aren't you glad you were watching today? We're going to make you even happier because the next prize is more conversation with Robert Taylor. Robert, this coming Sunday, on a radio program that I do called The God Show on KTAR. It's been on for 16, 17 years. And a longtime friend, now Pastor Vernon Parker, who used to be, or Vernon Meyer, who used to be Father Vernon Meyer, after 31 years, left the Roman Catholic Church because he didn't like their policies on women and gays. If Jesus came to you, appeared before you, do you think he would ignore you because you're a gay man in our society?
Good gosh, no. I think he'd probably give me a big embrace and ask the thing that I think he would believe is the only important thing that matters in our lives, and that if there is to be a judgment day, I believe will be the only question we are ever asked. How did you love? Or how generously did you love? And I think of the embrace that he'd give, because I think it's the image of his entire life and work. It was always about the inclusion of people who were on the margins.
And yet Christians and Christian hierarchy and Christian clergy, they're getting whiplash out there right now, listening to you say that. Say, gay life, it cannot be compatible with Christianity.
You know, I believe that we're made in the image of the divine, as we are. And I think the journey for me, Dr. Martin Luther King once said, and I'm paraphrasing him here, that the moral arc of the universe always bends towards justice. I suggest that the moral arc of the universe and the moral arc of spirituality is always about inclusion. If you look at every major religion, the big battles have always been fought over who is excluded, which ultimately becomes about a question that gets settled about who is included but not excluded. And so I think we're just going through another phase of all of that. And I think we're also living through a period in time when institutional religion is enjoying, like many institutions, because of technology, a last hurrah of trying to control and be the only mediators of the message. The internet has changed all of that, and so you've got, I don't mean to pick on the Roman Catholic hierarchy here, but you've got...
Oh, no, go ahead. I do that all the time, and I am one.
You've got, a bunch of guys telling more than half the world's population what they can and can't do. I mean, that is just...
the women of the world.
Such a throwback to another era.
When, in fact, the Roman Catholic Church also needs as many members of the clergy as they possibly can, just simply to handle the needs of the individual parishes that are not being led now because there's nobody to be in charge. The fact that you have kept this good company, I just put you in the company of Jesus, by the way, and I want you to know that happened in the morning scramble at no extra charge. But having been personally in the company of remarkable people in the world of spirituality, let me ask you what you learned from them individually. Desmond Tutu, what did you learn from him?
To be curious about other people, to want... The very first time I met him, he said to me, I was 22 years old, I was a white kid, and he was this 49-year-old, internationally famous anti-apartheid activist. And he said to me, "Sir Robert, tell me who you are, not what you've done." And I talk about that in the first pathway of the book, because I believe it's about the curiosity of wanting to know about another human being, out of which we discover sacred ground, because we discover connecting stories. I've also learned from Tutu a wonderful sort of self-deprecating sense of humor, not to take ourselves too seriously, that the moment we begin to do that, we're walking on pretty troubled ground.
What did you learn from Deepak Chopra?
Well, this wonderful sense that I think is true for so many people who are spiritual, is that there is wisdom to be drawn from the world's religions and spiritual traditions. There is ancient truth that transcends religion, and as many people have said, that God existed long before religion.
And from that remarkable human being you refer to as His Holiness, the Dalai Lama?
Well, I think several things. A playfulness that he shares with Tutu, and as I indicated earlier, the two of them are like little kids together. I love that impishness. But this constant invitation to compassion. And with it, I remember sitting in an audience with him a few years ago, and somebody said, "Well, if I become a Buddhist, can I learn better practices of being compassionate?" And he essentially said, "No, you don't need to become a Buddhist. Stay in your tradition, because that's what you were born into, and learn to be compassionate there." And so I piece all of that together and link the dots of him talking about compassion, which of course in my book I talk about as compassion for yourself, and Tutu always inviting us into love, and the truth of finding the resources in many traditions that help us get there.
The name of the book is A New Way to Be Human, 7 Spiritual Pathways to Becoming Fully Alive, with such practical advice as the things that you've already heard from Robert Taylor, but also how to get along in the office.
Yes.
That kind of surprised me. A lot of people who are writing spiritually oriented books forget that 8 to 9 plus hours a day, you're around a whole lot of other people, and it may not be the most spiritual atmosphere in the world.
Exactly. Well, and I like to talk about it precisely because, you know, in the book I talk about these pathways being discovered in the ordinariness of our lives, not in some sort of nirvana moments of a retreat that's removed from the day-to-day grittiness and rough and tumble. And the workplace, you know, you're absolutely right, is where many of us spend a lot of our time. And so I would suggest, you know, that it's possible to practice kindness in the workplace. And you may have that really toxic personality in the office who is sort of an emotional vampire, and they'll come to you about something. But there's probably an item about her or his life that you can say something kind about. And when you start to do that, just notice how the atmosphere, the dynamics in the office begin to shift.
You realize in the same hour that you have met the $1 Million Quartet and the $1 Million Trio, in this case, Robert Taylor, Desmond Tutu, and the Dalai Lama, not necessarily in that order. However, Robert Taylor is the one who wrote A New Way to Be Human, and you heard about it on the Morning Scramble on a Thursday.